everybody, and welcome to this video which covers other operant conditioning concepts as part of the psychology of learning topic for stage 2 psychology. Let's get started. So contiguity is a term that we've already talked about in classical conditioning, but it's also very important in operant conditioning. We know that contiguity refers to time. So when we reinforce a behaviour, it needs to be given or received as soon as possible after the desired behaviour has been performed, in order for the behaviour to continue. If it's left too long, animals and humans won't make the association and they're not as likely to continue the desired behaviour. My example that I always talk about is reinforcing my students to be on time for my lessons. If they are on time, I should reinforce that behaviour immediately or as soon as possible after it's been demonstrated. So if my students come to class on time and sit down like they're supposed to, I should reinforce them straight away, perhaps with chocolates. It's also the same with punishment. Punishment needs to be given or received as soon as possible after the undesired behaviour has been performed for behaviour to decline. So if my students are late, which is the undesired behaviour, and I say that I'm going to give them a detention, I need to give the detention as soon as possible or immediately after they've arrived late. By using contiguity in operant conditioning, we make it far more likely that reinforcement will continue desired behaviour and punishment will decrease undesired behaviour. This is because the reinforcer and the punisher has been administered as soon as possible after the relevant behaviour has been demonstrated. Now, contingency is also important in operant conditioning. We know that contingency is similar to consistency. So it's important that the reinforcer or punisher is consistent for the association to be made. So if I promise my students that if they're on time for my lesson, that they're going to get chocolate, I need to make sure that I follow through with that. In other words, I'm consistent with my reinforcer. If my students show up expecting chocolate and they've done the desired behaviour, but then I give them carrot sticks, it's not consistent. Now, some students may like carrot sticks, but if I'm not consistent, it's not as likely that the behaviour will continue. It's the same with punishment. If I say to my students they're going to receive a detention if they're being late, I need to make sure I follow through with that, because if I don't, students are not as likely to decrease the undesired behaviour if I'm inconsistent. It's also appropriate that the reinforcer or punisher be appropriate, as the same consequence won't work on all people. Like I said, chocolate is a great reinforcer, but some people may not like chocolate and would genuinely prefer carrot sticks. So we need to consider the differences in people and that certain reinforcers or punishers won't work for everyone. Another example is taking away a PlayStation from one high school student. This may have the desired effect. The student may learn that playing their PlayStation is contingent, or in other words, depends on them doing their homework for 1 hour after school. Taking away a PlayStation from a different student may have no impact if playing the PlayStation is not important to them. Let's talk about shaping. We have covered this in my previous video on operant conditioning terms, but let's go through it in more detail here. So, have you ever wondered how sea lions, dolphins, and elephants are trained to perform in lengthy shows, or how animals are taught new tricks, or how children are taught to swim? All of these behaviours don't come naturally. So, shaping is a very common and successful way of learning an increasingly complex behaviour using positive reinforcement techniques. So, parents will often use positive reinforcement to reward small steps that slowly build towards a larger goal. So, for example, when teaching a child to ride a bike, they first learn on a three-wheeler as they develop their balance, with the parent holding on. Then the parent will let go, followed by a two-wheeler with training wheels, until the training wheels are eventually removed. The parent eventually lets go and the child has learnt to ride the bike. So riding a bike is not a natural innate behaviour. So we are trying to shape a new behaviour using positive reinforcement, which takes a long process. So each of these steps is met with lots of praise, encouragement, smiles, and potentially small tangible rewards, such as stickers, to encourage the child to repeat the behaviour. So the behaviour in the child or adult or animal is being shaped. Now, preparedness is also relevant in operant conditioning. It relates to biological preparedness that can easily be observed when training animals. So animals can most easily learn and retain behaviors that draw on their biological predispositions or behaviors that come naturally to them. So some behaviors are shaped more easily than others. That's what preparedness means. Reinforcement is shaped more easily than punishment because the reinforcer is an incentive to keep going. Food is an excellent example for animals and humans. It ensures our survival and often has a pleasant taste. Therefore, we're more likely to continue the reinforced behavior. Let's now look at the process of operant conditioning in terms of the acquisition and performance phase. The acquisition phase of operant conditioning is when the reinforcer or punisher is being administered with an increase or decrease in the behavior. So it's the process of acquiring a new behavior, hence the term. So again, for example, I give you all a chocolate when they arrive or my students arrive on time to class, or give them a detention for being late. So this is the behavior I'm targeting, this is the behavior I'm trying to shape, and this is called the acquisition phase. The performance phase is when the subsequent behavior is performed without the reinforcer or punisher being administered. So performing newly learned behaviors without needing to reinforce it or punish it. So using my same example, my students arrive on time to lesson without me needing to give students chocolate or punish them, so the class stops arriving late. This is the performance phase because, in this example, my students are performing the desired behavior that's previously been shaped. I hope you found that video useful. As always, if you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, happy revising!